just remembering that grief is going to shape the griever and that grief is a stewardship. It's just another thing we're called to steward in life.
And I think that idea of shaping, I mean, that can be both positive and negative depending on how you handle the grief and how, you view what is happening through it. Because, I mean, there's people that come out the other side of grief and they've been shaped, but it's not good.
There is a compounding nature, maybe is the best way to say it, to grief, that if we don't deal with it and we just push it down and keep going and keep going and keep going, and then all of a sudden what to the outside world looks so silly or weird that you're grieving that much about that particular thing, that's where a good Christian is being slower to speak and is leaning in and saying, well, tell me about the other losses you've had in your life.
Welcome to Let's Talk About That, the podcast where we deep dive into Sunday's message and explore your questions. I'm your host, Astin Kahnk, and I'm excited to share this journey with you. Whether you're a longtime member of the Orchard or a first-time visitor, Let's Talk About That is your space to explore, reflect, and connect. Join us as we navigate the intricacies of faith, spirituality, and daily life, seeking to understand how the wisdom shared on Sundays can be applied to our modern challenges. So, grab a cup of coffee, find a comfortable space, and let's dive in together. This is Let's Talk About That, where the conversation about Sunday's message never stops. Well, welcome back to Let's Talk About That. And today we're going to be diving deeper into our new sermon series, which is called Scars on the Soul. And we're going to be taking some time to talk through something that I'm sure everyone has experienced in their life, and that is grief. And I'm happy to have two fantastic gentlemen sitting across from me, our lead pastor, Chip Parker, as well as Dale Tompkins, which is a local pastor and a Christian counselor in the area. So, gentlemen, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, first time Chip and Dale have been on the podcast.
This is
Let's
correct.
just get it out there. You just got to get it out there. Yeah.
I've been trying so hard not to put Chip and Dale, just put Dale and Chip. But thanks.
I don't know if you got the calendar invite I got, but she made sure it was Dale and Chip in the calendar invite.
She did, yeah.
I did, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I got to ask, Dale, was that as big a joke when you were growing up?
Absolutely.
I've got it from the Chip side. I never knew it from the Dale side.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anytime somebody could get it in there, that was. Yeah.
I will say, though, the one that was worse than any Chip and Dale joke was in fourth grade social studies when we learned what buffalo chips were. You know what buffalo chips are, Astin?
I don't.
Dried buffalo poop that Indians would burn and, Native Americans would use. So that was a bad day. Chip and Dale was not as bad.
No.
That was a bad day to be named Chip.
Yes. Yep. Yes, 100%. Well, Dale, thanks for being here. Why don't you just let our listeners know who you are and just tell them a little bit about what you do?
My name is Dale Tompkins. I am the pastor of Church on the Way, and I have been doing that for 20-something years now.
Wow.
And
founding pastor.
Yeah, planted the church. And been in that process, there was just a lot of hurting people and a lot of situations that needed a little bit more care than my seminary kind of degree had helped me with.
Okay.
And so I went back and got a degree in counseling. And again, just kind of grew out of people in my church needing help with things that I didn't know how to do. And so I wanted to learn how to serve them and care for them the best I could. Been doing that for probably 15 years now here in Lake City. And so just love walking with people and helping people.
I love it.
I think it is one, just from a, looking at it objectively standpoint, fascinating, but, seeing people in the church who assume because you're a pastor, you're a counselor is what I'm talking about. Like that's kind of fascinating that we link those two things. And then it gets very, I think overwhelming might be the right word as a pastor, because Dale has been trained and studied as a counselor. I have not. In fact, I am not a great counselor. I am probably a D- counselor because I tend to try to be funny when it gets awkward. Gotcha. And then I try to be blunt when I want to be clear. And, I think it's important, for not just people in the church to know that there is a difference between those things. Not that you can't go to your pastor and have someone to talk to, but there's a difference between someone who is doing, professional counseling and someone who is your pastor. And so it's important for people in church to know that, but it's also important, I think, for pastors to know that, hey, it is okay to say, this is beyond me. Let's bring in somebody who knows a little bit more about this, who knows how to talk about this. And that's not saying that, knowing scripture is not enough to address some of these issues. It is. But, I learned from Pastor Eddie, I kind of have like a 3-visit rule. If you need to talk more than 3 times about one subject, we need to find you somebody to talk to.
Yeah.
And so I think it's good when you see guys like Dale who have, joined both of those worlds and provide a resource for our community for, people to go to for counseling from a, not just a Christian perspective, but a biblical perspective.
Yeah.
Because always, the term Christian counseling isn't always necessarily what you would hope it is, but biblical counseling is a different ballgame. And so I think that's a great resource for our community. And to know the difference between those two, I think is important.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're very excited to have you on the podcast today. So we'll just go ahead and jump right into the conversation. So what are some different ways that grief can be seen in our lives?
Well, grief shows up in a number of ways that impact typically some kind of loss. And that can be the loss of a loved one. In my personal life, my brother died when he was 30, and that unnaturalness.
Yeah.
Right. You expect your grandparents to die. You expect your parents to die. And, and so sometimes that disordered death, if that makes sense, can create that. But also the loss of a job, the loss of, one of the elders at my church, his entire industry went away overnight.
Oh, wow.
Because of some changes in legislation. And so his whole career path just instantly, is gone. So that's a form of grief of like, now what do I do? I'm 30 something years old. This is all I've ever done. How do I move forward? But there's at the center of any grief, there's some kind of loss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And whether that's a person, a job, a possession, a pet.
Yeah.
Like there's some kind of loss that has happened. And it's now, how do we deal with that? And I think Tim Chalice it kind of gives us a very helpful definition there that it's a response and a process, that it's a response to that circumstance, that loss, whatever that is. But it is also that trial and that loss is the beginning of a process to get you somewhere. And the destination of that is acceptance, submission, peace, and hope. We have to accept the fact that life is but a vapor, the Bible says. Like it is going to come and go. Sometimes there's a submission to, well, I think it would have been better if it would have happened this way.
Yeah.
And we have to submit to, well, this is the way that God has ordained this part of your life to go.
Yeah.
And to have the peace and the hope that the gospel brings, that there is no loss to a Christian that will not be restored when that person is a Christian.
Yeah.
Right. So if we lose our mother, who is a Christian, we know that we have the hope of the resurrection, that we're going to see her again one day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we have to suffer in the meantime with that loss. But for a Christian, there's incredible peace and hope that there's an end date.
Yeah. I think that's good what you said, about the submission, because my mother passed away at 50 years old, a little bit before I turned 30, 2 weeks before our youngest son was born. And what I've, said since, and talking about that with different people is, I don't know that I ever got to the place where I was angry with God, but I definitely disagreed with God, And I think where I wound up going just personally in my journey with that grief is that I'm not sure in a lot of ways I don't still disagree with God, as in if I'd been there, I would have made a different decision. However, I did feel I was able to submit to say, but I want you to make that decision. And I'm glad you made that decision, because if I had made a different one, it would have been wrong, even if it's what I wanted.
Yeah. And there's a great resource if you find yourself in that place. Brad Hambrick has written a book called Angry at God. And he talks about the fact that the grief that has become stuck in anger, he treats it like a journey through a timeline and topography of that pain.
Yeah.
And that means it affects your thoughts, it affects your choices, it affects your relationships, and that we must shepherd that rather than suppress that.
Yeah.
So as a church and as fellow Christians, we need to help people who are angry and shepherd them through that pain, not just push it down and say, well, you shouldn't have that pain.
Yeah.
You shouldn't, because it is a loss.
So what ways, Dale, have you seen most people like try to avoid grief, right? Like maybe either short circuit it, not deal with it at all. Like what ways do you see people do that?
I would say the first thing I see is they throw themselves into their work.
Yeah, I believe
but
that.
Whatever it is they do, they just do it 120% the next day because it's, there's a rhythm and a routine to it. It's almost mindless if you've done it for a long time. And so that's probably the number one thing I see.
Oh, and it's morally acceptable.
Socially
right?
acceptable.
Morally
exactly.
Acceptable.
The second would be some form of addiction. Mm-hmm. So some form of overuse of a substance to numb the pain and in a sense, push it down. So if I can drink enough, if I can smoke enough, if I can take enough medications, I won't have to feel. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, we kind of live in a culture that promotes that in a lot of ways. And there's, God has been very gracious to give us medicine to help us. When your leg breaks, I'm very thankful for painkillers. And after the loss of a loved one, to have something to take to sleep because you're just so grief stricken is a blessing. Mm-hmm. But 5 years later, if you're still taking it, like maybe we've crossed the line here. Yeah. And we just need to be careful and we need to think through that.
I think
does that make sense?
It does. Because I think, this is the second time we've done a series called Scars on the Soul, where we've tried to deal with heavy issues like this. The first time we talked about anxiety, depression, addiction. This time we're starting off with grief. And what we've tried to affirm in the series is, like you said, medicine is a gift from God. And in many cases, it can and does help. But what we try to put forth at the beginning of all of this is the only hope that we have for real change is turning to Jesus and seeing Jesus so that we can be made like him.
Right.
And so what we've kind of said, and I honestly don't even remember where the wording first came from, is that medication cannot and will not make you turn to Jesus. But when you turn to Jesus, it can help clear away the fog so you can see him a little bit more clearly. Mm-hmm. And I think that image, was helpful for a lot of people because it's like, no, that medicine is not a cure, but it can help if used properly. Yeah. But if you're looking for your answer in a prescription, it's not coming.
Yeah. And the metaphor I like to use is a crutch. So again, if I break my leg, I'm going to be given some kind of assistance device to help me to walk. And that is perfectly normal for, 3 months to 6 months after I've broken my leg, depending on how severe the break is, to need some kind of support.
Yeah.
But if you see somebody who broke their leg and 10 years later, they're still using a crutch, you'd be scratching your head going, wait a minute, like, did they actually heal the wound, or did they just patch you up and send you home because you're still hurting? And so I think that is where, like you said, to clear the fog, help you to get to the place where you can sit down and talk about and think about why you are suffering to then move forward. That's incredibly helpful. I just would, again, just looking at the long term, like
what's the end game there?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's good.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So as a counselor, pastor, you've got some thoughts on grief, I'm sure. So why don't you just kind of maybe dive in and walk us through some of the biblical principles that you see around grief that you think might be helpful for people who are struggling with that?
Okay. Well, there's kind of 8 things that I kind of try to walk them through, or at least in my mind, it's kind of the framework that I'm using as I approach this. And the one is grief is real and it's not spiritual weakness. Thankfully, we have a Bible that teaches us about our God. And when our God looked at Jerusalem and the state of their hearts, he wept.
Yeah.
When Lazarus, his friend, dies, he wept.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was our text from the Message Sunday. Is that.
That's my first memory verse.
Yeah. And even Isaiah, 53:5, he's a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief.
Yeah.
There's your word. So I think that's really good.
And so, sometimes people can think that, well, we shouldn't grieve. We're Christians and we have the hope of the God. And we do.
Yeah.
But just because we're grieving, it doesn't mean that we're spiritual weaklings and we can't handle it. Like, we're imaging our Savior when we're grieving the way he grieved about the things that he grieved about.
So you can be spiritually mature and grieve.
Absolutely.
Well, I would say for me, Brandon and I sought as Christian counselor whenever we had a loss. We lost our daughter. And so our daughter Marley. And so that was something that brought me so much comfort, was the fact that my Lord and Savior wept. Fully God, fully human, he wept. And for me, that brought me a lot of comfort, knowing that it's okay if I weep. Jesus did. Yeah. If I grieve, Jesus did that too. Yeah,
absolutely. And so again, just knowing that we have a Savior who in all ways, every way that we could possibly experience this life, he understands.
Yeah.
I've dealt with a lot of sexual abuse, and that's one of the reasons that pushed me into counseling in the first place, was a lot of the people that were coming to me. And for me to be able to say, your Savior was nailed to a cross. He was stripped naked multiple times for just the pure humiliation aspect of it, right? So he didn't maybe experience sexual abuse in the exact way that you experienced it, but he experienced sexual abuse because all of these paintings we have of the cross where he has something on are not accurate. He was publicly sexually humiliated. And so that's the thing I love about Scripture and I love about our God, is in every way, no matter what you're suffering through, whatever the grief is from, he understands.
Yeah.
He knows. And so second is just, death is unnatural. And that is typically, again, there's some kind of loss that is tied to the grief. It's often death, whether it's disease in the sense that they're not dead yet, but they have this chronic illness. My daughter was diagnosed with diabetes when she was 6 years old. And so, I remember just grieving for months because it's like, as a father with the internet, you can look and see all the things that happen to a kid with diabetes. And it's like, I'm basically watching her die on some level every day. And then every night when she goes to bed, we didn't have the technology we have today. Thankfully, we have that today. But back then, it's like every night we're kissing her goodnight, knowing that she could go low in the middle of the night, never cry out to us. And we wake up and she's not there anymore.
Yeah.
And so that is unnatural.
Yeah.
That is not natural. And so knowing that and understanding that, that this is not the way in which God originally intended.
That's right.
That this is a consequence of the fall.
Yeah.
So.
And I think that's where biblical counseling, look in a biblical framework of grief, really diverges from a secular framework, because what secular grief would tell you is that, we all experience death, so it is natural. It's just a natural part of life. And even though we all experience it, does not make it a natural part of life.
Right. The third thing would be, you never just grieve the loss. You grieve what you brought to the loss. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, what do you mean by that?
So whenever I'm talking to somebody and they have ideas about God, they have ideas about the way their life should be, they have ideas that are often not rooted in biblical truth. The Bible's very frank about the fact,
such as God helps those who help themselves. That's one of my personal favorites.
Exactly. Yeah. If you pull yourself up by your bootstraps, I'm sure that's in Proverbs somewhere.
Surely.
Yeah. But we all bring into the experience of grief and loss some unbiblical ideas about the way the world works. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense.
And because we have those unbiblical ideas of the way the world should work, right? So even when I started this conversation, your grandparents die, then your parents die, then you die. But when a child dies, it's like, wait.
That's not
the rules.
Yeah.
Well, and even like you say, the order of that, I'm particularly struck by that because when my mother passed away in my late 20s, all four of my grandparents were still alive.
Wow.
And that was not that I wasn't pretty unique that all of them were still alive that late in my life, but like my mother was the first close, like intimately close loved one that I had experienced pass away. And that throws you for a loop because you're like, well, wait a minute. It's weird that my dad's mom's here and my mom's mom's here. My dad's here, but my mom isn't. Right. And so it's kind of that's not how it's supposed to work. Right. Did I think complicate things for me?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and the reality is we all have unrealistic expectations of some kind. Right.
Yeah.
And it's,
I thought I was going to break 80 on the golf course today. Unrealistic expectations.
Yeah. So it's, it's helping the person not only deal with the grief, but you have to kind of unpack, like, what were you expecting was going to happen? Like, because again, that's where we talk about anger in counseling. You know, I say that there is an expectation in life and then there's reality. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so if your expectation is way up high and reality comes in way down low, the difference is how angry you are.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay.
That is good.
The closer it is that your expectations align with reality, the less problem you have with anger. Or if your expectations, you know, don't exceed the reality, then you're great.
Yeah.
And so that's what I see with this. It's like they go into a situation with some expectations of, well, God owes me.
Mm-hmm. I've come to church. I've say
done all
the blessing.
Things. Yeah.
You know?
Right. And that's, you know, that's something, again, Tim Challies' book, Seasons of Sorrow. I highly recommend that book too, because Tim's like a pastor. He's, you know, he's world renowned.
If you don't know Tim Challies, he's one of the best Christian writers out there right now.
Yeah. And then God allows his son to die. And so he has to wrestle with, you know, this reality of like, well, what expectations did I have?
Yeah.
That because I have done these things, God is going to reward me. And now all of a sudden he's not.
Yeah, I don't remember what pastor said this. It was not a famous pastor by any means. It was in chapel while I was in school, and just made a statement that has stuck with me. It says, I've met a lot of people who are mad at God for not doing something he never promised he would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that was directly related to loss. And I think that's a big thing. Dale, one of the things I've heard people talk about with grief, I'm interested in your thoughts along those ideas of expectation and reality, is that sometimes when we experience loss, whether it be the loss of a child, loss of someone at a young age, loss of a marriage, loss of a job, whatever, I heard somebody say that you not only have to grieve what you lost, but that you lost what could have been.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's there again. And again, this is the expectations.
Yeah.
Like, I have all these expectations. Like, you know, my friend, he was like, I was working my way up to own my own business in this industry. And now this industry just doesn't even exist. You know, and I think a lot of people, my technology background here, but like there's going to be a lot of grieving in the next 5 years because a lot of industries are fixing to go away, and things that people have worked their whole life for, it's just not even a thing anymore. Now there'll be new things. I'm not a negative person. It'll, you know, every time there's some new thing, but you know, like my friend at church, he had to completely retool and go a different direction. You know, so we're going to experience that. But again, I think it's that expectation of like what could have been.
Yeah.
You know, and I see a lot of people kind of fall into that. And that actually leads me up to the fourth thing that we normally talk about is the traps of grief. And this is where authors like Paul David Tripp are incredibly helpful. He has a book called Suffering, and it's just a great resource. But
we'll try and link all these in the show notes. And
he talks about the awareness trap, which is basically the person becomes obsessively self-monitoring, constantly cataloging their pain.
Okay.
This is
say that again in a different way, because I think I know what you mean, but
I'll put it in pastor language for you.
All right.
So the awareness trap. Have you ever heard the expression "new fear unlocked"?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. I didn't even know yesterday to fear this.
Yep.
Once you start going through grief and you start experiencing pain, and as a pastor, this has been incredibly difficult. I don't know about you, but for me, you know, yesterday I get a call like, "Hey, pastor, can you pray for me?" Sure. What's going on? Well, I've been diagnosed with aneurysms in my liver. And I'm like, that's a thing?
I didn't even know it was a thing.
Exactly. Wow. And you know what? I woke up this morning. I'm praying for that lady, but like
your liver feels weird.
You're checking yourself. Yeah.
But I'm like, you know, I've got liver issues. Like, is this a thing? Like, so you become aware of something that you would have never been aware of before.
Yeah.
Another good example of this I see all the time in marriage counseling. You are going through life, everything is great, and one partner in the marriage has an affair or begins an affair or whatever, and maybe you stop it before it actually gets to a full-blown affair. You used to sit there on the couch and look over at your partner and see them texting on the phone and not think anything of it.
Yeah.
But now,
who you texting?
I'm aware.
Yeah.
Right? And so you begin to catalog all of this pain that you would have just dismissed the day before. Right. So that's one trap that we kind of fall into.
Yeah.
And it just snowballs because it's like, well, then this person died and then this person died and then this person died. And if your mother hadn't have died, you probably wouldn't have been paying attention to the obituaries. You know what I mean? Like, so
I would say I've even fallen in this trap, especially after losing Marley. Like now I'm so worried that something's going to happen to Lucy and Jax. And so it's this constant fear that you have to sit in. But I have to remember that just because it happened in this situation doesn't mean it's going to happen in the future. So I even catch myself even now still in that same mindset and having to take every single one of those thoughts captive, because you can sit in that, I feel like, and you can get really stuck.
Yeah. Yeah. And that actually is the second trap, which is the fear trap.
Yeah.
So now that you're aware of it, now that you're cataloging it, now you start fearing, you know, and it limits you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, we can't do this because this might happen. You know, I've seen people who get into a car accident and then they never drive again.
Yeah.
Because it's like, you know, well, it could happen again. Well, yeah, it could.
Yeah.
But, you know, a meteor could fall out of the sky and hit your house, or a SpaceX, you know,
that's right.
Satellite's probably more accurate, but
that's right.
You know, so, and then there's the envy trap. And I see this a lot in church. We get really angry at those people who aren't suffering.
Yeah.
So
I think that's good. I think, and I don't think we talk about that as much, you know, and again, you know, personally, in my experience, I found that I don't think it was like maybe the first holiday, but I think it was the second one, because my mom passed away at the very end of September. So it was still really fresh when the holidays came around. So everybody's still very aware of it. You know, the next go round, you know, almost a year and a half later, well, I caught myself saying, well, they're here with all of their family, you know, my family's not here. And it was weird because I don't think I would have guessed that that's something that I would have felt, but 100%. It was envy. It was jealousy. Not that I would say I want you in my shoes, but because they weren't, it did something in me.
And one thing that compounds this is when those people complain about their family.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That just, I see this so much when I talk to people, and I'll give you a couple of examples. One is miscarriage.
Yeah.
A lot of times miscarriage happens quietly.
Yeah.
Nobody knows that they were pregnant. They didn't tell anybody. And then they're in church and somebody is complaining about their kids in the fellowship hall.
Been there. Yeah.
And there is just this envy of like, you just don't even know how good you have it.
Yeah.
Right.
100%.
And so,
and miscarriage is a great example of that, because that's like the, you know, quiet epidemic that nobody wants to talk about because it is a secret grief. But then you find out, it's like, oh, wow, this is not as uncommon as I might have thought it was. And
I think this is the statistics, like 1 in 4, and it's, I would say it's way higher than that. 1 in 4 women have had a miscarriage, but I definitely would say it's more like 1 in 2 now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And unfortunately that has become more of a problem just with our health situation in our country. And another example is, and this is something personally, like I remember, so when Emma was diagnosed and we're doing those sleepless nights, like my wife literally felt guilty for sleeping because we were terrified. I mean, like we were literally terrified for the first couple of months and, you know, really into the first couple of years of like, she's going to go to bed and we didn't dose her correctly or she didn't eat enough.
Yeah.
And it's just a silent death. Yeah. There's no crying out in pain. The's no nothing, right?
Yeah,
so
before the technology was out, you had live monitoring.
We were checking, you know, and so we basically for a couple of years had no nights away from our kids.
Wow.
And then I'm in church on Sunday and I hear people complaining about, oh, you know, we could only get away for 2 days without our kids. And I'm just like, talk about an envy trap.
Yeah.
Like, it's like you just don't even know. You know, and they don't know. And I'm thankful, like you said, I'm thankful that they don't know. But I think a lot of people fall into that and it just exacerbates the grief.
Yeah.
The doubt trap, that's just theological doubt. You know, is God actually good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and that's, I see that a lot. The denial trap, just trying to minimize or spiritually bypass the grief. Like a lot of men do this. We're just going to push it down and we're going to keep going. And, you know,
it is what it is.
Yeah. And then there's the discouragement trap, long suffering leading to hopelessness.
Yeah.
So instead of leading it to hope and peace, it takes you to a place of just hopelessness. This is never going to get any better.
Yeah. So what do you see that hopelessness look like in people who have gotten there through grief?
Just a lack of joy.
Yeah.
As Christians, we should be the funnest people in the room.
Yeah.
But oftentimes we are not.
Oftentimes. Oftentimes. Matter of fact, if you want a list, I'll let no.
But, it's like, they may not have lost their faith. They may believe in God, but like, there's just a sourness that has just marked them.
Just waiting to die.
Basically.
Yeah.
And I talk to a lot of older shut-in women that, like that's like, I just don't understand why God won't just take me. Like I'm not going to do anything, but like, I'm just so tired. And I just, Yeah.
And I think that there's a place when people get there and you understand it because they are days, hours, weeks away, and I'm just ready to go be with Jesus.
Yeah.
But then, like you say, and Dale's right. I mean, I've experienced this as well. There's people like you have decades.
Yeah, they're 50. They're 50.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that's young nowadays.
Yeah.
I'll never forget one of the funnest people I've ever pastored was a lady whose name was Leona McRae. She was 89 years old when I came to Airline, and she passed away at 94 years old, I think. And she was a trip. She was like so funny, and she was quick, and she'd been widowed for a long time at this point. But she was like you say, the funnest person to be around. I'll never forget. I had not been there very long. And one Wednesday night, or maybe it was Sunday night, she tripped on the sidewalk outside the church and scraped up her face pretty bad, like road rash or whatever from the concrete. And our pastor, who was there at the time, he was there when I first came. He said, well, Miss Leona, if you'd stop drinking, you wouldn't fall as much, like trying to get one over on her. She did not miss a beat. She goes, I didn't have to drink till I heard you preach for the first time. And she was just that kind of person. And so those are the kind of people, like there's an attraction to, I want to be around Miss Leona. She's amazing, you know? And so you hate when people lose that. So I know exactly what you mean when you say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The fifth thing is, anger at God needs to be addressed, not dismissed. And that's something that I think the Psalms are so helpful for. One of the exercises we do in biblical counseling is teaching people how to lament. We've kind of lost that art in the church. Yeah. But when you read a lot of the Psalms, I mean, it is just a person going, God, why is it this way?
Yeah.
My enemies are surrounding me. They're not honoring you. I'm honoring you. Like,
why isn't this working?
Right. And so to be able to go through that process of learning how to lament and cry out to God and address that, not try to dismiss, you shouldn't be like, And at the end of the day, at almost, and this is funny, not every Psalm, but almost every Psalm, he starts out angry at God, but ends up in a good place.
Yeah.
But there's a couple
where he doesn't end in
a good place. So even on your bad day, I'm so thankful that we have scripture that reminds us that it's okay to be a human being and express how we're feeling, because God can handle it because he is God.
All right. So I want to play maybe devil's advocate a little bit. I don't know if that's the right term here. Kind of lean. How about this? I want to lean.
He doesn't need an
this.
advocate, Chip.
Fair enough. I just like to cause trouble, to be honest.
He does.
So, is it a thing when people maybe lean into their anger at God too much because of I don't know, maybe a better way to say this, the trendiness of being okay to be angry with God? And what I'm thinking about is this, right? I'm thinking about the people on, social media who their badge of honor is, oh, my life is such a mess. Oh, I'm just such a mess. Ha, ha, ha. Isn't it funny? I think I've seen people do that with their hurt toward God, where it's just like, no, this has become your whole personality, is that you're angry at God. So how do we make sure it doesn't go too far?
Well, I think this is where the shepherding comes in, and making sure that they have the right expectations to begin with. Because again, a lot of times with those people, when you sit down, they have some very unrealistic expectations about the way church and faith was supposed to work in the first place. And this is the process part that Chalice talks about. Like, the grief is the experience, but then there is a process that you are working through. And again, I think if you're taking them back to the Psalms and saying, read these Psalms, like listen to David, listen to the various authors as they talk about these things, you're helping them, give them the proper language to be angry with God. Like using God's word and tell, I'll tell people, pray this.
Yeah.
Pray this anger, but use these words as a template and then customize it for yourself. I'm not surrounded by my enemies, but I feel like you've abandoned me with my child.
Yeah.
Like you've abandoned me by taking my mom far too soon.
Yeah.
Whatever that specific thing is, cry out to God and be honest about that. I think most of those people that you're talking about are probably disconnected from a church, period.
A lot of times, yeah.
And if they are, they're nominal, and so they're not pushing into this process of grief. It's just kind of another way of, humor is a way to deflect.
Yeah.
And so, we kind of fall into that trendy, make light of this, and I'm going to say I'm angry at God and everybody's going to understand. And there's a large group of people that will understand,
yeah,
sure. Yeah.
But it doesn't mean it's right.
I think that's the thing. I think you hit it on the head where their anger at God is more maybe an excuse for why I'm not, leaning into it or whatever. And I think that the idea of, like you say, the process, that there's an end goal here.
Right.
It is, you're not supposed to stay in your anger. You're supposed to move through it. Yeah. And acknowledging it is really just dropping pretense. It's not like God doesn't know you're angry. Exactly. It's just you being honest enough to say it, but not to stay there. You got to get to the other side.
Yeah.
So I think that's good.
Go ahead. I'll say for me, the art of lamenting, like I had heard of that, but I never really leaned into that until we lost Marley, and I was given this book, Dark Clouds, Deep Mercy, and I'm only 50 pages in because out of 200, because it's so deep, but it's so good. And the fact that, I've loved Jesus my entire life, and the fact that like it's okay to be angry with God, but you can't stay there was like, because to me, I was like, oh, I can't be angry. I can't do this. I can't be jealous. But I was like, no, the fact that Jesus experienced all of those same things when his friend Lazarus died just gave me so much comfort. So the art of lamenting, man, just completely just opened my eyes to just the beauty that there can be in grief and that refining period of your faith if you allow yourself to press in and let Jesus walk with you through it.
Yeah. And I would argue that you have a richer, more robust faith.
Yeah.
Than you did before the grief.
1,000%. 1,000%.
And that's like you were saying, that is the end goal.
Yeah.
Is to grow you in hope and trust in your Savior.
Yeah.
And that can only happen through these things.
Yeah.
Well, that's what Martin Luther said. Martin Luther said, that there are certain things we can only learn through prayer. There are certain things we can only learn through study. And then he says there's certain things you can only learn through suffering.
Yeah.
And I think grief is a part of that. It's just the transition through suffering.
Yeah.
And I think it was Lewis that said that, sometimes God speaks quietly to you through your life, but he shouts at you through the pain.
Yeah, that's right.
So true.
So it's like that's when it's like getting your attention and forcing you to deal with some things,
That's right.
Kind of gets me to the sixth thing. The comforts of God are specific. This is where it's really helpful to understand God's attributes. Knowing about his omnipresence, when you're a victim of sexual abuse, he was there with you. You weren't there alone. And a lot of times, when you're a victim of abuse, you think nobody was here. And he was there with you in the midst of that. He's with you, when the house is empty and you've lost your spouse and it's just you.
Yeah.
You're not ever really alone. So it's nice to be able to help them to understand that God's comforts are very specific. His sovereignty, his purpose, God's people, all of these things kind of help come alongside and help you to realize that if you're doubting and you're struggling with, what does this look like? Knowing the comfort of God because Chip calls you and talks to you, or somebody in your small group is walking through and showing up with dinner and sitting with you. It's funny. My grandfather was a deacon of Mount Carmel Baptist Church here, and that's one of the main churches I grew up in as a kid. And my grandfather would tell me, I asked him, I remember, like, well, what does a deacon do? I knew they took up the money.
How do you deacon?
Yeah. And he said, well, he's like, one of the things that we do is when a husband and wife and one of them pass away, is we go sit at the house all night. Because back then they didn't come and pick up the body in like 2 hours.
Yeah.
It was like, well, we'll see you in the morning, you know? So you're literally sitting in the room with a deceased person and their spouse.
Yeah.
And I said, well, but what do you do? And he says, you don't say a word. It is just the ministry of presence that they are not alone.
Yeah.
And reminding them physically that God is with them. And that always struck me.
No, that's so good, because I'm telling you, people mean well, but will say some dumb stuff to try to comfort somebody.
Yes.
It's It's terrible. Terrible. Yeah. Also, because I will not be able to continue to concentrate without getting the squirrel out of my brain. But one of my favorite songs only makes sense in the context that Dale was talking about, and that is Ray Stevens' I Ain't Sitting Up With the Dead No More Since the Dead Started Sitting Up Too. You ever heard that, Astin?
I have not.
Yeah, it's about
she doesn't know anything about squirrels going berserk, brother.
No, hey, my boys know every word to that song. Anyway, you'll have to reach out to me if you know what song I'm talking about on that one. But that's exactly where, like, we don't do that anymore, so it's not as funny, but it's still funny. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, squirrel.
So the seventh thing is that grief's not the end of the story, and that's something that we have to be, I think, reminded of. Just, if nothing else, the eschatological future, the end time understanding of God is going to restore and renew everything. And this is where, for me, it's so helpful. I don't know about you, Chip, but I remember growing up, going to church, and I didn't think heaven was that cool. Because I'm like, if all we're going to be doing...
really boring, if we're being honest right now.
If we're just going to be singing these songs 24/7...
Yeah.
How hot is that other place? No. But when I really started to understand that I was not made for heaven, I was made for earth. And that when you read the Bible, that is where we end up. Mm-hmm. Heaven comes to earth in Revelation. We are not going to heaven. And so we are made to live on this earth, but in a perfected state. That is the end of the story, man.
Yeah.
Like, and all of the people that I love and care for who love Jesus are going to be there for eternity, and I will never have to grieve.
Yeah.
Like, that's an exciting view of the afterlife that I don't think as a kid I got.
No.
I was just going to be sitting on a cloud singing a song. Holy, holy, holy. And I'm like, well, he's got angels that do that every day. Why do I have to do
it's
that?
Like, okay, eternity's a long time, guys. Matter of fact, I'll throw another resource out there. If that is kind of like a new concept to you when you're listening to this, I would highly encourage you to grab the book. Get this, the title, Heaven by Randy Alcorn. I don't necessarily agree with every one of his takes in that book, but as far as like a just very easy to read, comprehensive look at heaven will be what earth was supposed to be because heaven and earth unite, like that's kind of the gist of it. And it's good. It does make you see things in a different light, because Philadelphia cream cheese, on a cloud with people who sing off key did not sound like a great eternity for a while. But, turns out that's not what it is.
Yep. So helping people remember the end of the story, is helpful, because the grief, the loss can feel like that's the end of the story.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, it's like, well, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And so helping them gently, kindly, not necessarily day one, but in that process of reminding them that we have a hope that we can look forward to, in the future. And then finally, just, we touched on this briefly, but the 8th thing is just remembering that grief is going to shape the griever, and that grief is a stewardship. It's just another thing we're called to steward in life.
And I think that idea of shaping, I mean, that can be both positive and negative depending on how you handle the grief and how, you view what is happening through it. Because, I mean, there's people that come out the other side of grief and they've been shaped, but it's not good.
Yeah. It always moves us in a direction.
Yeah.
The question is which direction. And then again, this is where I think the church and counseling can be helpful, is like it can shape you in a direction that is more helpful to you on the other side.
Yeah. I think that's really good. All right, Dale, I want to put you on the spot with this question a little bit as a pastor and counselor. Really going back to the 7th thing, about reminding people about this isn't the end of the story. We just celebrated Easter. We know that his resurrection was a securing of our resurrection, when we believe in him.
Yep.
All right. How do you comfort somebody who knows their loved one was not saved? What kind of hope can you offer them in those situations?
That is one of the most difficult things, Chip. And the only thing that is above it is preaching that person's funeral. When family members call me and they're like, "Hey, can you preach it?" But they're not. They never professed, and that is incredibly difficult. And there's no real easy answer for that. There's just not an easy answer.
Yeah, I know it is.
I mean, I think it should. If you're listening and you're not in that situation, it should spur you to evangelism.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to have to be preaching that funeral. I don't want to have to be sitting with you, because nobody shared the gospel with that person.
Yeah.
So I would hope it would spur you to evangelism.
Yeah.
For the family that you do have left.
It's, it is hard. I think what even complicates it sometimes is the part of the world we live in with this, Southern fried Christianity that we have going on, is that there's a lot of times where somebody has made a profession of faith, that they know enough to have a relationship with Jesus, but you look at their life and there's no fruit of it, and the family's kind of left in that limbo of, all right, so how much do we play in this? How much do we look at this realistically? And I think, that it is important in my experience, it's been important to, in those situations, just try to show as much grace as possible.
Yeah.
There are some times I think that our theopraxy is maybe more important than our theology, that us living that out in grace in that moment is more important than parsing the finest points of theology we have with these people. I'll never forget, and I won't say names on this podcast because they may be listening to it, but there was somebody who was grieving the loss of a dear pet, loved this pet so much. And someone in our church goes, that they don't go to heaven, right? Like, your pet doesn't have a soul. And I was like, brother, this is not the time for a theology lesson right now, And so I think that's where maybe if you're in that situation with someone who's struggling, just do as much as you can to show grace. And again, like you already said, sometimes, Dale, the best thing we can do is just shut up and sit down, and let that be the comfort that it is. And
I want to chase that squirrel. I don't know if the pet was a squirrel, but I want to chase that squirrel in just a second. But I want to circle back. I had a chance to think one small way that there is a possibility of giving hope. And I don't want to give false hope by any means, but I really wonder how many people in the thief's family that was next to Jesus on the cross believed he was going to heaven.
That's 100%.
Yeah,
correct.
That's so good.
And you don't know what happens in those last few hours when the reality of death kicks in. What happens? And again, I don't want to give false hope. But that is always a possibility, and that is always something that I can encourage you to hope happened. So there's that.
I think that's really good, because I think that is, in my experience, a way that you do not have to compromise your theological convictions, but you can say at the end of the day, we don't know what happened between them and the Lord, especially in the part of the world we grow up in where the knowledge required for that is maybe more abundant than it would be in other places in the world where it's just not accessible to them. So I think that's really good.
Yeah. But to the pet thing, and this is something I've noticed over my years of ministry, is people will have the loss of a loved one, mom, dad, whatever the person was to them in their life, and they will go back to work and they will power through for the family. They will do what they have to do. And then when their dog dies, it ain't about the dog.
Yeah.
That's when the grief of the previous loss catches up with them.
Yep.
And all of us are looking there going, man, it was a dog, or it was a cat, and my wife, if she probably won't listen to this, but if she did,
mine doesn't either, you're fine.
If she did, she was like, I might grieve more for my cats than you, Dale. But like there is a compounding nature, maybe is the best way to say it, to grief, that if we don't deal with it and we just push it down and keep going and keep going and keep going, and then all of a sudden what to the outside world looks so silly or weird that you're grieving that much about that particular thing, that's where a good Christian is being slower to speak and is leaning in and saying, well, tell me about the other losses you've had in your life.
Yeah.
What's happened in your family in the last couple of years, and then it's all of a sudden of like, it comes out, and it's really not about the pet. Like, I mean, it is to a degree, but like, or the pet represented the last connection I had to my wife or to my husband.
Yeah.
And when I lose that, I feel like now I've fully lost my spouse.
That makes that's a really good word, because just the compounding nature of grief, like you're not as moved when a grandparent passes away or, a sibling passes away. But when those losses come back to back, and then all of a sudden, well, I had a coworker I haven't seen in 15 years, and then boom, just whatever it is, it hits. And I think we saw a lot of that during COVID, you know, when there was just loss upon loss upon loss, and you got numb to it. And then in 22, something happens and it's like, boom, it all hits.
Yeah.
And that's a good word.
Yeah. And so I would have a question for you. So what would you want to tell someone maybe who is currently walking through grief, or a fresh, like, just grief has just happened? Like, what would you be kind of like the first thing, you know, not only as a pastor, but also as a counselor, kind of like combined, what would you tell them?
The importance of community. Mm-hmm. Don't walk alone.
Yeah.
I mean, theologically, you're never walking alone. God is always with you, even in the valley of the shadow of death. Lo, I'm with you. Like, he is with you. Yes. But Christianity is not an individual sport. It's a team sport. It was never meant to be done by yourself.
Yeah.
As Americans, we've made it into an individualistic sport.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the biblical way.
Yeah.
And so finding some fellow travelers who maybe are ahead of you.
Yeah.
Right. So if you just lost your spouse, find some widows who like 5-10 years ago lost their spouse that can walk with you through this process.
Yeah.
I don't know that you always need counseling per se, but you do need people.
Yeah.
And sometimes you need counseling if it is a complex, complicated thing, but most of the time you just need a group of people who understand and don't say the stupid things.
Yeah.
Like, oh, God just needed another angel in heaven.
Brother,
he's got plenty of angels.
Top three.
He's got plenty of angels. He doesn't need another angel.
Yeah.
Well, actually.
Technically.
Yeah. So having people that have experienced it, that know not to say the dumb things. They know when to just shut their mouth and let you talk and grieve, you know, and that are going to reach out to you and text you and say, hey, I'm praying for you today.
Yeah.
When the church is being the church, it's an amazing thing.
Yeah, I agree.
But unfortunately, like I say, we tend to be more individualistic, and I don't want to bother people. That's the big thing I hear.
Yeah.
Is I don't want to be a bother. That's what we're here for.
But you have no idea what that text message or what that drop by or what that surprise meal would do to that person. The fact that they could be praying like, God, does anyone, or even think like, once they're past the grieving stage, you know, it's a couple months later, it's like, have they forgotten about me?
Yep.
I don't want this person to be forgotten, but like, you know,
that's good.
The meal train stops, the phone call stop. And I feel like that's where, you know, we have to, you know, find a balance of like making sure you check in on that person, but not like bombard them every day with it.
Yeah. And we're very much, we like to come in, make a big show. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean like we're providing meals. We're doing all these things.
I'm okay making that in a negative way sometime. Don't be one of the people who makes everybody's loss about you.
There's that.
I'm just going to throw that out there. Don't be one of those people that your time to shine is when somebody dies and you make it all about you. Let the people who need to grieve.
Yeah. And so 3 months later, the house is quiet. Nobody's dropping by.
Yeah.
Not getting the food, not getting the, you know, that's when a group of people that I almost kind of, that are outside of my church, but that I am friends with, that I like to kind of sit back and let all of those people do the things they're going to do for the first 3 months. And then just create a couple of reminders in my calendar.
I've done that too with some friends.
Reach out 3 months from now, reach out 6 months from now.
Yeah.
And not, you know, how are you grieving, but how are you doing?
How's the grief going?
I've been thinking about you a lot. I've been praying for you. Is there anything I can pray for you? Like you say, you never know how they were praying that morning. Like, does anybody care?
Yeah.
And the reality is they do.
Yeah.
But somebody else's family died. So the care ministry is now focusing on them. And it's not, again, that's why I say it's not a negative thing. It's they're doing what they can do, but death just doesn't happen once.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's constantly happening,
you
know? And so we're constantly as a church having to triage and help as many people as we can. But it's helpful for us to also think about that and to be able to do that. And I want to say it's like Jonathan's ministry, or there's a particular ministry that we've utilized in the past that's super helpful, because you basically sign the person up and then they send things at a certain interval on your behalf. Okay. And it was birthed out of that somebody was like, you know, it was great in the beginning, but then it just kind of, And so it's a great ministry that partners with churches to help them be better at that.
Yeah.
You know, so it sends a reminder to the person that's in charge to reach out. And so I think that can be a helpful way to use technology to do the church better.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Well, Dale, as we wrap up this podcast, any final thoughts that you want to share with our listeners today? You can also say no if you don't have anything.
Yeah.
Just remember that we have a God who grieves. And when he looks at sin, he grieves over that sin. It's important for us to learn how to rightly grieve the things that God rightly grieves. And even in being angry, God gets angry.
Yeah.
Anger itself is not the problem. It's the, be angry and sin not.
Yeah.
It's that sin not part that's really difficult for us. And so when we're talking about grief, and if that's where you're at today, is just to know that you have a God who is grieving. He describes the entire world as groaning, waiting for the day that this corruption is gone.
Yeah.
And so even the earth is crying out in grief because of the state of the world. And so know that you have a God who is with you and who will never leave you, and that this is not the end of the story.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good.
So good. Well, Dale and Chip, thanks so much for being here on this conversation. And to you listeners, we hope that this conversation was a blessing to you today, just to see that it's okay for us to grieve because Jesus also grieved. We will continue the sermon series, Scars on the Soul, next week, and we will take a closer look at the topic of loneliness. We hope that you guys have a great week, and we'll see you then. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Let's Talk About That. We hope it encouraged and challenged you as we continue to grow on this journey of faith and embrace community together. If you have more questions, thoughts, or feedback, we want to hear from you. Be sure to reach out to us through our social media or visit our website to stay connected. If you found today's discussion meaningful, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review. Until next time, we hope that this episode inspired you and will keep Sunday's message at the front of your mind. See you next week.